Ancient wisdom and modern thinking often seem worlds apart. But what's fascinating is how Jesus masterfully wove universal truths into the cultural fabric of his time. And that changes everything about how we understand his teachings today.
That's such an interesting perspective. How his message wasn't just dropped from above, but carefully crafted to resonate with Hebrew tribal life.
What really strikes me is how different their worldview was from our modern individualistic mindset. For the Hebrew people, everything, and I mean everything, was about the collective. Their understanding of faith, sin, even salvation itself, was wrapped up in being part of something bigger.
Well, that explains why Jesus put so much emphasis on shared meals and community gatherings. These weren't just social events.
Exactly right. Take the Last Supper, for instance. He was deliberately taking this profound communal practice of Passover and transforming it into something that would define his new community. And what's really fascinating is how he used these familiar cultural touchstones to expand their understanding.
So if these teachings were so culturally specific, how did they become universal?
That's exactly what makes his teaching method so brilliant. He used their cultural framework as a bridge, not a barrier. Like when he talked about being the good shepherd, that wasn't just a nice metaphor. For his Jewish audience, that immediately connected to centuries of scripture depicting God as Israel's shepherd.
And you know what's interesting about that? He was taking these deeply Jewish concepts, but showing how they could embrace a wider world.
Right. And let's talk about his teaching style for a moment, because this is where it gets really fascinating. He wasn't giving abstract theological lectures. He was using concrete, tangible examples from daily life. Seeds, sheep, bread, wine, these weren't random objects. They were the building blocks of their everyday experience.
That connects directly to the Hebrew concept of yada, their word for know, which was about relationship and lived experience rather than just intellectual understanding.
Exactly. And this is where his miracles take on an even deeper meaning. When he healed someone with leprosy, it wasn't just about curing a disease. It was about restoring them to their community, their family, their place in society. It reflected this Hebrew concept of shalom, complete wholeness and harmony.
Well, that puts a whole new perspective on why his healings were so powerful. They weren't just medical interventions, they were acts of social restoration.
And think about how he used storytelling. The Hebrew people had this rich tradition of using narratives to convey truth, and Jesus was a master at this. His parables weren't just clever illustrations, they were invitations to wrestle with deep truths through story.
Like the Good Samaritan, that wasn't just a moral tale about helping others.
No, it was deliberately challenging their entire conception of who counts as a neighbor, who belongs in the community. And what's fascinating is how he used these familiar story patterns to introduce radical new ideas without completely alienating his audience.
That makes me wonder about all the subtle connections his original audience would have picked up on that we might miss today.
Oh, absolutely. Even his name, Yeshua, meaning salvation, carried this deep significance in a culture where names were seen as expressing someone's essential nature or destiny. Every word choice was intentional and layered with cultural meaning.
So, what you're saying is that understanding these cultural connections doesn't just add interesting background, it fundamentally changes how we understand his message.
Exactly that. And here's why. Jesus wasn't just dropping truth from heaven, he was cultivating it in the soil of human culture and experience. He was showing how divine truth could work through human frameworks while also transforming them.
Well, that really changes how we might approach these teachings today. Not trying to strip away their cultural context, but understanding how that context actually enriches their meaning.
And that's the key insight. It's not about choosing between being culturally specific or universally meaningful. It can be both at the same time. Jesus showed us that divine truth doesn't bypass human culture and experience. It works through it.
That's such a powerful way to think about cross-cultural communication in general.
You know what this reminds me of? Modern global businesses that succeed internationally. They don't ignore local cultures. They engage with them meaningfully while maintaining their core message. Jesus was doing something similar, but with eternal truths rather than business strategies.
And that approach seems more relevant than ever in our increasingly connected but culturally diverse world.
Looking ahead, I think this has huge implications for how we approach ancient wisdom in modern contexts. Instead of trying to strip away all cultural elements to find some pure truth, maybe we need to better understand how truth works through cultural frameworks, both ancient and modern.
That's really giving me a new perspective on how to read and understand these ancient teachings.
And that's ultimately what makes these teachings still so powerful today. They show us how universal truth can speak through particular cultural expressions, while transforming them into something even more profound.